Now, according to Nigeria's National Pension Commission, pension assets under the contributory pension scheme surged to 5.94 trillion naira over the last 3 years. Joining me now to discuss this is Oguche Agudah, who is CEO, Pension Fund Operators Association of Nigeria. Oguche, it's such a pleasure to have you on the show. Good morning to you.
Good morning. Pleasure to be here.
Same here. All right, well, let's begin with the mechanism around the CPS. Just for people who don't understand it, just give us some more insight into the workings of this as a system.
Yeah, so the CPS is an acronym for Contributory Pension Scheme. And what that means is that whilst you are working, a portion of your salary is contributed every month to your pension fund administrator. And that's the scheme Nigeria operates in. 2004, a law was set up compulsorily. Your employer sets aside 10% of your salary and you set aside 8%. And that is kept every month with your pension fund administrator who invests it. So over time, the investments will grow. And then when you're retired, you can have that money to use for your retirement. So it's in your own retirement savings account. That money is not for anyone. It is for you. You're contributing towards your own retirement. And I think it's one of the best economic policies we've had in Nigeria.
Right. In terms of the public understanding this, do you think there's enough sensitization around how that dynamic works for them in relation to retirement? Because some people still don't understand that this is actually towards your retirement.
Yeah, I think there's been a lot being done in terms of sensitizing them. A lot still needs to be done, and we'll continue to work on that. So yes, a lot has been done, but a lot still needs to be done. We need to educate people more to understand that they're saving for their retirement. No one will do it for you, and the money is in your account and it's growing. So many people talk about how they've contributed, but if you check your RSA balance, you will see that most of what you've contributed, your investment returns has actually outpaced that. So that has been work done by the pension funds over the number of years.
All right. Well, let's look at efficiency and transparency of the scheme. These are areas that I'd like you to speak a little more extensively around. What kind of work has been done in that regard?
Great. I think the National Pension Commission, PENOP, has done a great work in terms of their research, and most of the data is on their site, and we also try and put those on our site. So every quarter, you can see the level of investments for the pension assets, where it's been invested in, how it's been grown. So that is quite strong in terms of transparency. Also, for each RSA holder, so if you be contributing to a pension fund, statutorily, you're meant to get your statements every quarter. So your PFA must send your statement to you. And typically, you get alerts every month. So that helps in terms of transparency and efficiency. People can see what's in their account. They can query their PFAs. Most of the PFA, if not all of them, have apps where people can check. So it's something that has grown over the number of years and is efficient and transparent.
All right. Well, now let's look at what we should consider good news, right? Over 1 million new contributors over the course of 3 years. Now let's talk about what we could attribute this growth to. How did we get to this point, and could it possibly reverse in any case?
I don't think it will reverse because the federal government is the largest employer of labor. The Pension Act states compulsorily federal government workers and private sector workers must subscribe to this scheme. So over the last number of years, federal government has, of course, employed more people. And as new people come into the workforce, they open their pensions accounts and the growth comes. We also have private sector people. Employment has also been strong. And as new people come into the workforce, they open their RSA account. But the pension assets, there are two major things that make it to grow. Number one is the contributions from new people who join the workforce and investment returns. So whether it's dividends, coupon, or gains from sale of equities or fixed income instruments, so those two aspects are what cause the growth in pension assets.
Okay, well, of course, let's also look at the recapitalization of shareholders' funds when it comes to the PFA, which has been, one of the Commission's huge achievements till date. Let's speak a little bit more to what this means for PFAs and RSA holders.
Great. So their capital base was increased about 5 times, from 1 billion to 5 billion about 2 years ago. And what this means is that all the PFAs now are recapitalized, well recapitalized. And these funds can be used to buy equipment, to hire more people, increase service. So what that means for RSA holders is that they can expect, better returns, more service, quicker, faster, technology adoption. So those funds will be used to grow the business and to be more efficient. So this will augur well for the PFAs, the industry, and the contributors.
But in what ways more specifically for those who don't understand how?
Yeah, so when the PFA is recapitalized, so what happens is that they've got more money, and that money will be used to open more branches. They are closer to their constituents and their RSA holders. They're more efficient, and hopefully brings the cost down because they're able to work on economies of scale, and that should help the RSA holders.
Okay, absolutely. Well, now to an area that lots of people get excited about, or perhaps not so much excited, residential mortgage equity contributions. Now, it sounds like a mouthful, but there are lots of people who want to benefit from this. Now we understand, of course, we've seen some developments in terms of applications. Could you speak to the number of applications, what it takes to go through the process, and what it takes to be successful at it as well?
Yeah, so it's something we're also excited about because it means that if you've been contributing to your pensions over a while, you have the opportunity to own your own home through a mortgage, right? So since when the policy started around this time last year, there have been close to 700 applicants, and about 7.98 billion has been disbursed to those people to enable them own their homes. So what happens is that if you've been contributing to your pensions and you have contributed for up to 60 months, it doesn't have to be cumulative, but up to 60 months, you are eligible, right? That's one. If you have more than 3 years to retirement, you're eligible. So what that means is that when you're eligible, first thing you have to find the house. When you determine the house, and then you find the mortgage firm that is willing to give you the mortgage. So those two things, the house and the mortgage firm. And once that happens, you approach your PFA with the mortgage firm to say, this is the house I've gotten, the house is X amount, and I want to use 25% of my RSA balance to be able to use to pay as a down payment for that mortgage, and then you pay the rest. So we're excited about it. We think it's a way for Nigerians to own their homes, especially if you have a pension account. And hopefully it gets more people to begin to contribute to realize that it is a pathway to owning homes. Yeah,
absolutely. It's always a good, building block towards that, and just getting the understanding around it. Well, let's open the conversation a bit wider now and look at investment, particularly in the real sectors of the economy of the country. And I'm talking, of course, in relation to pension assets. Could you speak to some of the projects that are perhaps currently in the offing around this?
Yeah, So the pension assets are invested in various asset classes, as you would know, whether it's fixed income, whether it's on equity, whether it's bank deposits. So for pension assets, many people always want to know how we invest in infrastructure and the rest. And, if you look at some of the bonds that have been issued by the federal government, number one, a couple of those bonds are used to finance projects, right? Most of them are general bonds, but the federal government also issues specific Sukuk bonds, and Sukuk bonds are really infrastructure, non-interest bonds. And these monies are used to build roads and used to build a number of things for the federal government. So in that regard, the pension funds are heavily invested there. Also, if you look at the corporate debt, a number of the corporate debt that most of the corporates have issued, most of them are used for infrastructure, whether it's to build plants, whether it's to build base stations, whether it's to expand operations, whether it's to build cement factories. So a number of pension assets have been invested there. And what you will see is there's been a lot of interest in Nigeria's pension industry from foreign development institutions coming to work with us to see how we can begin to prepare projects so that pension funds can invest. Because one of the key things is, the projects to which pension funds can invest, and that is safe and that the money will come back. So there's a lot of work around there and looking at sustainable investments, whether it's green, climate sustainable investment. So that is in the offing, and there's a lot of work being done. But currently, we do invest in infrastructure through the bonds issued by some of the state governments, the federal government, corporate infrastructure, and also directly with some infrastructure funds and infrastructure bonds.
Right, so it sounds very infrastructure-centric. Are there any other areas you're looking at apart from that, or just at the moment it's infrastructure?
Well, yes, there are other areas. Infrastructure is broad. So
Absolutely.
Infrastructure could be education infrastructure, digital infrastructure, agricultural infrastructure. One area is private equity. And last week we had an event with the Africa Private Equity Association where we sort of tried to bring pension fund managers and private equity professionals together to see how we could invest more in this asset class. So, on private equity, different asset classes, whether it's private debt, whether it's private equity, real estate, or infrastructure. that's one area that we're also looking to increase allocations.
Well, let's look at the informal sector now. Now, that, of course, is always very fuzzy because a lot of people, the moment you hear pensions, you have to be in the corporate world or you have to have some sort of formal work going. Let's give us some sensitization around micro pensions, for instance, and how, in relation to the informal sector, how does this roll out?
Yeah, so we're trying to disabuse people's minds that pension is just for those in the formal sector. It's really for those in the informal sector, and so much so, as much because they will retire soon. So we've got a large informal sector, and if those people retire and they don't have pensions, it's going to affect all of us. So it's something that we all need to be focused on. So it's people in the formal sector, whether gig workers, young Nigerians, whether people at the bottom of the pyramid, or whether professionals who don't have up to 5 people working with them, so they can also key into pensions. And we always like to say it's a self-sponsored pension plan. So you don't have to have an employer. You can decide to register and begin to contribute yourself. So, and that is where the micro pension is. So it's really about you choosing your PFA. It's usually about you choosing how much you want to contribute. So you don't fall within the 8% or the 10% bracket which the formal sector falls under. So you can determine how much you want to contribute. You can determine how often you want to contribute. And the key thing is that once your contributions are there, there's a portion of 60-40. So there's a 40% contingency portion, which you can take at any time, right? The other one is left to when you retire. So it's something that we're trying to develop for those in the informal sector to be able to get them to ensure that they have pensions when they retire.
So if I understand this correctly, they are more in control of how the contributions go, as opposed to the formal sector where you just deducted from me. I don't even have a say in that anymore, right? So you have to just be more mindful of making those contributions for the informal sector.
Very true.
All right, well, let's get your wider outlook for the general pension and insurance sector, actually, for Nigeria for the long term.
Well, I think it's one sector that has grown quite well. And I always like to say it's probably one of the most important pieces of legislation in Nigeria's economic history, the Pension Reform Act. Because what that does is that there's a lot of capital available to invest in various sectors of the economy, and we've seen that. So in terms of outlook, I think the pension funds will do more in terms of investing in the real economy. I also think that there will be growth in terms of more people getting jobs and more people starting their pension assets. So I think the outlook is strong and positive. It was a bit slow during COVID with people either losing their jobs, but we've seen a growth and we think that will continue.
All right. And in wrapping up, let's look at what work your organization is doing for the future in terms of anything new. What building blocks are you laying on the ground for the next 5 years, perhaps?
Yeah, so what we continue to do, education and sensitization, which you spoke about. So there's a lot we are doing in terms of letting people know what pensions is, how they can contribute to pensions, how pensions are affected themselves or Nigeria. So there's a lot of education, also a lot of training and building blocks for the pension professionals to ensure that we have the right professionals to be able to manage people's pensions, and also just engaging the financial markets, local and international financial markets, on various products that pension funds can invest in so that they're able to grow the pension assets for the fund and the contributors, and also just ensuring safety of pension funds, ensuring we're engaging the regulators and the legislature as well. The regulators, the PENOP, they've been a driving force in the growth of the industry, and we continue to engage them. So those are the verticals that we continue to concentrate on. All
right, sounds like a lot of great work there. Of course, there's still a lot ahead to do, but it sounds like you're already laying those blocks. So, Oguche, I want to thank you so much for joining us this morning on the Global Business Report.